Dear children, in today's video, I will be dealing with the topic regulation of kidney functions in the same chapter, chapter 19. Now, the kidney functioning is regulated and monitored by a hormonal feedback mechanism involving hypothalamus, JGA and the heart. So, once again, the functioning and regulation of the kidney is monitored by hormonal feedback mechanism, and which involves three different structures. The hypothalamus, it's a part of the brain, JGA I will be explaining in this video, and heart to some extent. So, all this is controlled by a feedback mechanism, hormonal feedback mechanism. I hope what is the meaning of feedback? This is a switch on, and that is by a feedback mechanism it is switched off. So, once again I am reiterating the point, the function of the kidney is monitored and regulated by hormone feedback mechanism involving hypothalamus, JGA and the heart. Now, before going into the details, something which is new, that is JGA. Hypothalamus we will be learning in the next chapter, where it is the basal part of the brain. Heart you all very well we have learnt in circulatory system, the pumping organ. Now, JGA are cell modifications. It is a sensitive region between the distal convoluted tubule and the efferent arteriole. See, I have pulled out the figure of the nephron. Do not expect the nephron to be coiled in a specific manner. It is very much coiled, and you can see there is a sensitive region. I will highlight that region. It is located between the efferent arteriole and the distal convoluted tubule. So, once again I am specifying the region between efferent arteriole and the distal convoluted tubules. So, this region, like a patch I am indicating. This is a very sensitive region, and this region is called the juxtaglomerular apparatus. So, I have highlighted, it is not between the efferent arteriole, it is between the efferent arteriole and the DCT. This is the JGA. Just to spot out JGA, I took this diagram. Correctly you can see this space. It is a sensitive region where you can see the cells are modified. That sensitive region, it is a patch between the efferent arteriole that enters the glomerulus and the distal convoluted tubule, not the proximal convoluted tubule. This is JGA, and the JGA, when it is stimulated, it releases a hormone called renin. We are going to see how it works, JGA, and under what conditions JGA works. So, now you are familiar with JGA. Now, to start off, I have given yellow color for hypothalamus, white color for JGA, and heart I have given pinkish red color. So, accordingly the flow chart or how it is being, how it is regulating kidney function is given with the same color. Now, we are going to start off with a condition where the glomerular filtration rate is very low, which means the BP is very low. The blood pressure is very low. If the blood pressure is very low, definitely it affects the glomerular blood pressure. And what happens as a result? The glomerular filtration rate also becomes low. See, the glomerular filtration also becomes very low. So, the initiator is low BP. So, I have initiated with this condition. When the blood pressure flowing through our blood vessels is low, it affects the glomerular blood pressure. What happens to the glomerular blood pressure? It also becomes low, and as a result what happens to the glomerular filtration rate? It is very low. We know that the glomerular filtration rate of a healthy person is 180 liters per day, or in terms of minutes it is 125 ml. Okay. So, the pressure should be maintained. If it drops, the pressure should enhance. If it is high, the pressure should be dropped. So, there should be fluctuation to maintain this rate and to generate so much of filtrate. there should not be fluctuations. So, for that what happens is we have the hormones to bring about the fluctuations in BP. When the BP goes high, it is brought down, and when the BP is gone low, it is brought high. Okay, so let us start off with low BP. So, the initiator I have started is with low BP. When the blood pressure is low, this will affect the glomerular blood pressure. The glomerular blood pressure is also low. So, the blood flowing through the glomerulus is very slow, and as a result what happens to the glomerular filtration rate? That also becomes slow or low. This condition only stimulates our JGA. Now, we know the location of JGA. It is a sensitive region between the efferent arteriole and distal convoluted tubule. That region will secrete the hormone renin. This renin will immediately convert an inactive protein called angiotensinogen. See, this is an inactive protein. It will immediately get converted into angiotensin 1. And immediately angiotensin 1 gets converted into angiotensin 2. So, once again you can see a cascade of reaction. It's all started with low BP, therefore, the BP at the glomerulus is low. This will result in low glomerular filtration. This, as a result, it stimulates the JGA to release renin. And renin, what does it do? It catalyzes the angiotensinogen, inactive proteins in our blood, is made active. It's immediately converted into angiotensin 1, and immediately angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2. And the angiotensin 2 will stimulate the adrenal cortex. We know the adrenal glands. It is located just above the kidney. If this is our kidney, you can see the adrenal glands like cup-shaped structures above the kidney. And this adrenal gland is also divided into two regions, outer cortex and inner medulla. This adrenal cortex produces a very important hormone called aldosterone. So, what happens is this adrenal cortex is stimulated, and this adrenal cortex releases the hormone called aldosterone, and aldosterone will bring about what? Reabsorption of sodium and water from the DCT, from the distal convoluted tubule of the renal tubule of the nephron, and as a result what happens? The blood pressure increases. How did the blood pressure increase? The water added to the blood. So, the volume increased. When the volume of the blood increased, what happened to the blood pressure? It increased. And when the blood pressure increased, what happened? The glomerular blood pressure also increased, and thereby the condition was rectified. The glomerular filtration rate also increased. So, you understood, we started off with low BP and finally how the BP increased, and due to low BP what happened to our glomerular filtration rate? It was low. Now, our glomerular filtration with high BP, it has increased. So, once again reiterating the role of JGA. See, we started off with this situation when the body BP, when the blood BP is low, what happens automatically? The BP or the blood pressure at the glomerulus is also low, and as a result the glomerular filtration also is low. This stimulates the JGA to release the hormone renin, and renin, what does it do? It converts this inactive angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and immediately angiotensin 1 gets converted to angiotensin 2. The angiotensin 2 has a twofold effect. So, I am bifurcating two arrows. First we will see the first arrow. This angiotensin 2 stimulates the adrenal cortex of the adrenal gland to release the hormone aldosterone, and aldosterone helps in the reabsorption of water and sodium from the DCT. And where is this water and sodium getting collected? Into the PTC, the peritubular capillary. As a result, the volume of the blood increased, which means the pressure of the blood has increased. So, the situation is rectified, which means the glomerular blood pressure has also increased, and therefore, the glomerular filtration rate has also increased. But this cannot go on. So, I am going to continue further with pink color, which indicates the role of the heart. So, now this mechanism, so far what I took, which deals with the role of renin, if I highlight it with another color, here we see the role of renin and angiotensin. This mechanism is called renin-angiotensin mechanism. The role of renin-angiotensin mechanism, the low BP was rectified and the BP has increased. But can it continue? There should be a stop, switch off. So that switch off is done by the heart. So now we can see the role of the heart. Now what happens? Now when the blood pressure has increased, lots of blood flows to our heart. Okay, the situation of low BP decreased, that low BP, decreased BP has rectified, now it became high BP. It cannot continue further. So lots of blood goes to our heart. Now what happened? We know the atria, that is upper chambers, are stimulated and it releases the ANF. And the ANF serves as vasodilators. The meaning of vasodilators is the blood vessels are having a diameter. Vasodilators means the blood vessels diameter gets dilated. So when the blood vessels gets becomes dilated, what happens to the glomerular blood pressure or the blood pressure? It is decreased, and as a result what happens to the glomerular blood pressure? It decreases, and as a result the glomerular filtration rate also decreases. So I hope how the heart takes over. So when the BP has increased in our blood, we know its role in the kidney is it increases the glomerular blood pressure, and as a result the glomerular filtration rate also increase, but it cannot go so fast. So the check on this renin-angiotensin mechanism is done by the ANF or the atria. So this mechanism in white is called the ANF mechanism. So ANF mechanism serves as a check for which mechanism? The renin-angiotensin mechanism. So once again, due to that renin-angiotensinogen mechanism, what happens? Lots of blood flows to our heart. Therefore, our atria is stimulated to release this factor ANF, and this ANF acts as a vasodilator. You know what is vasodilator? The blood vessels become all dilated, and when the blood vessel becomes dilated, what happens? The pressure decreases. Therefore, the immediate result is decreased blood pressure, which ultimately results in decrease in blood pressure of the glomerulus, and therefore the glomerular filtration rate also decreases. So you saw one mechanism is checked by another mechanism. Which was the first mechanism? It was the renin-angiotensin mechanism. Renin-angiotensin mechanism, from low BP it increased the BP. Now that switch off of or to bring a feedback or to switch over to low BP, it was by the heart. Lots of blood flows to the heart, and then ANF is released by the atria, and this ANF is a vasodilator. Therefore dilates the blood vessel, and therefore the BP decreases, which means the blood pressure at the glomerulus decreases, which means filtration rate also decreases. So you saw how one mechanism is checked by another mechanism. Now here I stopped at angiotensin, and I am going to highlight angiotensin. It is having a twofold effect. See, angiotensin is having a twofold effect. One effect, it acts on the adrenal cortex. We saw that route. The other effect, it acts as a vasoconstrictor, opposite of dilator. Constrictor means it shrinks the blood vessel. The blood vessel it gets shrunken, constricts, and as a result, when the blood vessel constricts, what happens? The BP increases, and as a result, what happens when the BP increases? The glomerular blood pressure increases, which means the glomerular filtration rate increases. So you can see this mechanism or angiotensin has a twofold effect. Once again, concentrate on angiotensin. From angiotensin, I bifurcated two arrows. One is how it's acting on the adrenal cortex, we saw that route, and the other, angiotensin 2 itself is a vasoconstrictor, brings about constriction of the blood vessel, and when the blood vessel constricts, the BP increases, and when the BP increases, what happens? The glomerular blood pressure increases, and therefore the glomerular filtration rate has increased. We saw finally how the glomerular filtration rate has increased. But that should be checked, and that checking is done by the heart. Okay. Now moving on to the role of the hypothalamus. Finally, let's check the role of the hypothalamus. Now, the initiator here is diuresis. What is diuresis? Excess loss of water via urine, or the hypotonic urine. In simple terms, hypotonic urine. We cannot afford to lose so much urine or water in the form of urine. So, that water should be conserved. Diuresis cannot be allowed. So, there's a mechanism. When there's diuresis, this is a medical terminology for hypotonic urine. When diuresis occur, what happens is our osmoreceptors of the bodies are activated, and this stimulates the hypothalamus of our brain to release the hormone ADH, antidiuretic hormone. And again, like our angiotensin II, the antidiuretic hormone has two-fold effect. The two-fold effect is one, like the angiotensin II, it is a blood vessel constrictor. As I told you, the blood vessel, it constricts, and therefore the blood vessel shrinks, and when the blood vessel shrinks, what happens to the BP? The BP increases, which means the glomerular blood pressure increases, which means the glomerular filtration rate is enhanced. Okay. Not only that, I told you, I bifurcated here, indicating that it has a two-fold effect. ADH helps in the reabsorption of water. We know which and all points of the nephron water is being reabsorbed. We saw at all the segments water is reabsorbed. It is reabsorbed from the PCT, from the Henle's loop, from the DCT and the collecting duct. So, we have to incorporate all that. Reabsorption of water from PCT, Henle's loop, DCT and collecting tubule. So, it helps in the reabsorption of water. When water is reabsorbed, what happens? A lot of volume, the blood gets a lot of volume of water, thereby that itself gives a feedback, switch off our osmoreceptors. It acts as a feedback. When water is reabsorbed from the PCT, DCT, loop of Henle and the collecting duct, what happens? The blood volume increases, or the fluid of our blood increases. That itself gives a switch off. It switches off our osmoreceptors. So, that's a feedback. So, here the feedback is by the amount of blood fluid that will result in switch off of the osmoreceptors, and this does not happen. It does not stimulate the hypothalamus, and this is switched off. ADH is stopped from being released. Now, I will continue with this. The role is ADH helps in the reabsorption of water, and as a result, a lot of water is being reabsorbed from the filtrate, and finally, the urine that comes out will be hypertonic. So, that solution which we started, the problem which we started, diuresis or hypotonic urine is being solved. We get the hypertonic urine. That is why we do not lose lot of water in the form of urine, especially during summer. So, once again, the role of hypothalamus, starting from the beginning, I will do it another color. We start off with the situation hypotonic urine or diuresis, a condition where a lot of water is lost in the form of urine. In that case, what happened? Our osmoreceptors are activated, and these osmoreceptors stimulates the hypothalamus of the brain to release ADH, antidiuretic hormone, or it is called vasopressin. It has a two-fold effect. I am going to simultaneously tell about the two-fold effect. One, this ADH itself is a vasoconstrictor. So, it brings about constriction of the blood vessel. When it brings about constriction of the blood vessel, what happens to the BP? The BP of our body increases or enhances, and therefore, what happens to the glomerular BP? That also increases, and the glomerular filtration increases. Now, this side I told you the ADH helps in the reabsorption of water from different parts of the nephron, from the PCT, Henle's loop, DCT and collecting duct. and thereby what happens at that time, the urine that is from the glomerular filtrate, a lot of water is reabsorbed, and therefore the urine that comes out is hypertonic urine. At the same time, how is the condition of our blood? Blood is highly diluted with water. Diluted in the sense the volume has increased. That itself switches off the osmoreceptors. The amount of water in our blood becomes so diluted that the osmoreceptors are switched off. So, switched off means it stops stimulating the hypothalamus, and therefore, there is no EDH produced. So, you can see in this mechanism where the hypothalamus is involved, the feedback mechanism is by itself. The very presence of high volume of water in the blood itself switches off it by stimulating the osmoreceptors, by switching off the osmoreceptors. Clear? I hope you have understood these 3 flow charts. I will be giving handouts to make it more clear, but this video is very important to understand one step to the other step, and this is the way how our kidney, which is so complicated, is functioning. Okay? Thank you.